Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the Digits Dynasty Podcast, where we are counting down the greatest athletes to wear each and every uniform number, regardless of the sport, regardless of the league. Today, we are looking at the number 5. I'm here alongside Curtis, whose go-to karaoke song is Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. How's it going, Curtis? You weren't ready for that one.
I'm more of a Mozart guy myself.
Ooh, he's decomposing right now.
Is he decomposing?
Sorry.
Man, you're on fire today.
2 for 2.
You're on fire today.
How are you doing this morning? This morning, this evening, whenever we're listening to this?
Wherever you are in the world, it can be morning. It's morning somewhere. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. It's 8 a.m. somewhere. So I'm doing good today. I mean, I'm excited about number 5.
Number 5, it's going to be a big one here.
Yeah, I feel like we have a lot of people to cover, a lot of athletes to cover, a lot of fun stuff to talk about. And number 5, I mean, it's a pretty common number.
Yeah, these single-digit ones really, we've talked about in the past, but they really encompass a lot of sports. I feel like every sport for the last 100 years have really encompassed these single-digit ones, and it'll be interesting to see where we go with this one.
What are some of your favorite things about the number 5?
Well, I'm going to start big here, the high 5.
I'm big into high fives.
And yeah, it's iconic in sports, in everyday life. I can't remember the last day I haven't given somebody a high five. I feel like it's just...
Oh, you do it on a daily basis?
Oh, I feel like I'm giving my kids high fives all the time, too.
Now, do you have because the high five has kind of evolved into these secret handshakes. And do you have secret handshakes with anybody?
My memory is not good enough to keep track of more than really 1 or 2 different handshakes. I want to say back in my sports playing days, I may have done that, but I can't recall any of them right now.
Okay, I'm more of a fist bump guy today myself. When I run into colleagues at work in the hall,
Do you call them high zeros?
No, I call it like pound the rock. Yeah. I have one coworker who still wants to play bloody knuckles, and okay, I never shy away from a challenge, but can't say I do a daily high five. You and I are more of a handshake kind of friend.
Yeah, business.
Yeah, it's all business with us. All business all the time.
Yeah, do we joke? I don't think we've ever told jokes to each other.
Nope. We never make fun of each other. We never, we tend to always agree.
I disagree with that, though.
Serious. Why are you arguing with me?
I'm sorry.
This might be the first time. The high five, though, I mean, I was shocked to discover how recent the high five is.
Yeah, it seems like it's something that should have happened for generations, centuries.
Oh, what were people doing before the high five?
I feel like back in the 1700s, George Washington would have gone up and been like, yo, great battle, guys, high five.
But what did they do?
They must have just been like, well, General, great battle out there.
Don't touch me.
Please.
We don't have showers.
We can nod to each other maybe? Maybe
a nod. I'm guessing a handshake. I mean,
handshakes?
I don't know when the invention of the handshake is. It came much before the high five, I believe.
It's not a number handshake, so I guess we don't have to look into that. Not sure when people are listening to this podcast. It's not the day we are currently recording this, but if you are listening to this on the 3rd Thursday in April, happy National High Five Day.
Happy National High Five Day to you. I prefer National Hot Dog Day myself, but hey.
Conventional wisdom has been that the origin of the high five occurred between Dusty Baker and Glenn Burke of the Los Angeles Dodgers at Dodger Stadium on October 2nd, 1977. I feel like that should be National High Five Day.
I mean, yeah. What a claim to fame to be recognized as the inventors of the high five.
And I think even with this, I'll go a little bit more into it, but I think Dusty Baker has really kind of said, it wasn't me. It was all Glenn Burke. He was just kind of on the receiving end of that.
It takes two to tango with a high five.
Takes 2 to 5.
It's 10.
Oh, crap. October 2nd was the last day of the regular season, and in the 6th inning, Dusty Baker hit a home run off of Houston Astros pitchers J.R. Richard. It was Baker's 30th home run of the season, making the Dodgers the first team in history to have 4 different hitters with at least 30 home runs in a single season. And then as the story goes, it was a wild, triumphant moment, a good omen as the Dodgers headed to the playoffs. Burke, who was waiting on deck, thrust his hand enthusiastically over his head to greet his friend at the plate. Baker, not really knowing what to do, smacked it. His hand was up in the air, and he was arching way back, says Baker. So I reached up, hit his hand. Seemed like the right thing to do. ESPN did a little 30 for 30 on the high five. Kind of cool little short documentary to watch. I feel like this was written as early as in the early 80s. They accredited the high five to these guys. After retiring from baseball, Burke, who was actually one of the first openly gay professional athletes, used the high five with other gay residents of the Castro district of San Francisco, where it really became a symbol of gay pride and identification. There's other people who try to claim the high five, and one of those, the University of Louisville Cardinals basketball practice during the 1978-79 season. Forward Wiley Brown went to give a low five to his teammate Derek Smith, but suddenly Smith looked Brown in the eye and said, "No, up high." And they said, "Yeah, why are we going down low? We jumped so high." Raised his hand, and they say that the high five was supposedly born on that day. Now, that was seen in highlight reels of the 78-79 Louisville teams, but the Dodgers high five took place in 77, so I feel like that kind of took place first.
Story kind of sounds made up too. Like,
I know,
jump so high,
yeah.
why don't we high five up high?
And then Magic Johnson has also tried to take credit for it, saying he did it with his teammates while playing at Michigan State. He played in the late 70s, which would have been after 77 as well, which again is after the documented Dusty Baker, Glenn Burke high five. So I think it's attributed to Dusty Baker, Glenn Burke. We're going with that, and we want to thank Dusty Baker, Glenn Burke for giving that high five.
Thanks, Dusty. Thanks, Glenn.
Can we put the high five on the board? Can we retire that as our greatest five?
Just like me and you giving a high five?
Like, we'll just put, maybe not my hand, but like a good hand on the wall alongside the rest of our greatest. I guess it's not a jersey. Maybe we can't do the high five.
No, I'm going to go ahead and say no.
I think alongside the high five, do you ever play fives? You know, when you get up from your chair, call fives. It saves your seat for about 5 minutes. And that's like, I think, legally binding. I'm not sure if that's actually a law anywhere, but you call fives on your chair and someone takes that chair, that's death penalty. I'm not sure what the penalty is, but I feel like that's a very, very sacred call of fives.
It's one of those unspoken man rules. I honor that as well. But like I said, I'm old now, so people don't steal my seat. I still fear of the old man.
I'm scared of you.
We have 5 senses. Some have a 6th sense, but most people have 5 senses.
What's your favorite sense?
Oh, taste. I love to eat.
If you had to lose one sense, which one would you lose?
I mean, that's tough. I mean, I want to be able to see. I want to be able to hear. I want to be able to taste.
So now you're between smell and touch?
Smell kind of goes hand in hand with taste.
Yeah.
Touch, I guess.
It's going to be tough to cook without fingers and hands though, right? Or do you just not, or you still have the fingers, but you just don't have any sense on them?
Yeah, I mean, that's hard to kind of imagine not having touch and what that would do to you. You can kind of imagine what it would be like if you can't see because you've been in a dark room. You can even imagine what it's like to not hear because you've...
What was that?
You know, you can kind of imagine all these things. Now we've gone through COVID. You can kind of imagine what it's like not to smell. Initially, I would say touch, but I think it would ultimately come down to maybe hear. Maybe I would lose my hearing. What about you?
I think I'm on the same boat. I think I'd like to definitely want to keep my eyesight, keep my hearing. I don't know that I have a great sense of smell anyways, so maybe that goes. I feel like when we have some like moldy milk in the fridge and my wife's like, "Hey, can you smell this?" I'm like, "I don't smell anything wrong with this." And in general, I just don't. So it might be chunky and I can taste that, but I don't smell that there's something wrong with this milk.
I always go in. I just tip it back, take a swig.
What's the worst that's going to happen?
I mean, I've had worse than a little sour milk. So you know what? If I need to be the official taste tester of the sour milk at home, I'm happy to bear that cross.
Mix it with some cereal. You don't taste it. On May 5th, 1921, Perfume, released by Coco Chanel number 5.
Is that why it's number 5? Since it was released on 5/5?
May 5th. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Interesting.
I think she liked the number 5, obviously. Yeah, it's been going on for 110 years now, and over 110 years, a pretty iconic perfume.
Yeah, no, I guess I thought, you know, we talked about WD-41. Or WD-40. So I assumed that
this was
Coco
like the 5th
Chanel
attempt.
number 5 was like the 5th formula. So interesting that she just liked the number 5 and it was made on May 5th or completed or...
I think released, yeah.
Released. Okay.
Released.
Sorry, I
world.
Listen to you.
No.
5 Olympic rings.
Yeah, obviously we just came back from the 2024 Paris Olympics, but the 5 interlocking rings represent the number of inhabited continents represented by the Olympians. Of course, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, and Oceania. Blue, yellow, black, green, and red.
Indeed.
Okay.
I do believe that. There are 5 Olympic rings. What's your favorite Olympic event?
Oh man, I wasn't expecting that question. I like the winter more. I think it's a little more homey, smaller events.
I'm a classic guy. I like the track and field. I like the gymnastics.
Yeah.
We're a gymnastics house, so we always gather around and watch our American gymnastic team and pull for them. Pretty, legendary performances here in the last 40, 50 years by the USA gymnastics team.
Yeah, I think winter, I like the skiing is pretty classic.
And they go so fast. I mean, that's
pretty
where
crazy.
an Olympic athletes, no matter what sport, you must appreciate. But man, some of that slalom skiing, going around those flags, that high jump where they're in the air for so long it feels a little bit more dangerous.
We had I'd lived in Utah for a period of time and got a lot of skiing done in the winter. And at one point we got tickets to go to Snow Basin, which was one of the mountains out there and where they actually had the downhill. And so we were going and we're telling a bunch of people, hey, we're going up to Snow Basin. They said, you have to go to the bathrooms at the top of the mountain. All right.
Interesting.
We can go to the bathrooms up there. And they said, because it was the Olympics and they're getting this worldwide audience, they put in a ton of money to make these bathrooms look beautiful. And I made sure to go to the bathroom. A very nice bathroom. Marble, beautiful. It was very nice. The skiing was also great. The bathrooms were what everyone told us what the highlight would be.
I mean, were they heated? Were they?
It's just very big, beautiful, very well maintained. But it was just funny that quite a few people were telling us you got to check out the bathrooms.
Is that the coolest bathroom you've ever been in?
I've been in some pretty cool bathrooms, but maybe top 10, top 15.
I saw something. What's the busiest bathroom in the whole world?
Okay, that would make sense. Busiest airport.
Like Gate B or something at the Atlanta airport gets the most traffic.
Wow.
So just, heads up to all those people. Maybe, get on to C or D or F
or bring some wipes and wipe off that seat. There's probably been a lot of butts on there.
Some disinfectant with you. We've got the Pentagon, where the national defense sets up. Obviously, the building having 5 sides.
Largest office building in the world, I believe.
Yeah, how many miles to walk around the entire...
They have the a 9/11 memorial kind of right outside, and just amazing how massive that building is. I think it's only, I want to say 6 or 7 stories, but it's just takes up acres and acres. Are they going to have to add like a 6th wing there when they get the Space Force? Because I feel like it's the 5 wings of the department, right? Of the Department of Defense. They have the Army has a branch, Navy, Coast Guard,
represents
Marines. I believe each branch has a branch or a wing, but the Space Force is now a 6th military branch.
Shouldn't it be on top?
I was going to say maybe they get the roof.
Yeah, they get the roof. So it's about a mile to walk around the entire perimeter.
Ooh.
18 miles of corridors, however.
That's pretty crazy.
So hopefully your meeting is in your corridor. Or you might need to push it back. Or maybe do a Zoom.
Ooh, there you go. Or if they get some segues in the building. Penta in general obviously just means 5. You have the pentathlon, pentagon. Interesting with that, most bolts, if you're building around the house, building things, most bolts are hexagonal, which is 6-sided, but the ones on most fire hydrants are actually pentagonal because you need a special wrench to open them. They don't want just anyone having those wrenches.
I mean, who's got a wrench that big anyway? I mean,
well, probably got
some 8 inches long to get around that thing.
Mentioned real quick earlier, Beethoven's 5th Symphony, considered one of the best known compositions in classical music. It's in C minor, by the way, in case you didn't know that. I don't want to hum it because I don't want to pay any royalties to Beethoven, but you know the 5th Symphony.
I know it by heart.
Oh, it's your karaoke song, I heard.
Did you know that Mozart composed his first symphony at age 5?
Ooh.
So a little competition there, a little Beethoven-Mozart competition.
Do you think he really knew what he was doing, or is it like when my kid, who is 5, is kind of singing songs?
I mean, I'm telling you, I'm looking at my kid. She's 5 now, as we're recording.
She'll listen to this down there.
He's smart. Was he really composing an entire symphony?
There wasn't really much else to do. back in those days. They're not watching TV. They're not watching.
Talk bad about my own kid, but we're not composing any symphonies around the house.
She'll find her thing.
She got a great memory. Don't get me wrong. She's, a lot of secret talents that I already see already. And she's really into music. But gosh, that's crazy to like look at her and then think of Mozart as a 5-year-old and think that he was writing music. I almost don't believe it.
I know. It was so long ago that you really can't. All right, he had to have a little help, right?
Been time for that legend to grow a little bit.
5th president was James Monroe, elected president 1816, 1820. He bought Florida for $5 million. So I don't know if that's I don't know if it's a good thing. I don't know if it's a bad thing. I feel like back before Florida Man moved in, it was probably a good purchase, but maybe since, I wonder if we could sell it back. I like Florida. I live here. We'll keep Florida. We want to stay part of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, it keeps our continental U.S. kind of intact. A lot of coastline.
Do you have a lot of coastline?
Florida's not so bad. It's a good place to go.
No, we like it. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, it gets a bad rap lately, but, that's just what you read in the news.
James Monroe also crossed the Delaware with George Washington in the Battle of Trenton. He's actually in that famous Crossing the Delaware painting. He also came up with and proclaimed the Monroe Doctrine in 1823. That's of the doctrines, I feel like that's one of my favorite.
Big fan of the Monroe Doctrine, huh?
Yeah. I think there's I only know of, there's that one and the Bush Doctrine, but the Monroe Doctrine is basically kind of says back in the 1823, he said, hey, Europe, you stay over there. Don't come colonize us over here in the New World. If you do come over here, we're going to take that as an act of war, and we're going to fight back. He actually died on July 4th, 1831. So he's the 3rd president of the first 5 presidents to die on July 4th.
Didn't we just talk about John Adams and Thomas Jefferson?
Yeah, I think that was in the first episode. And yeah, so not on the same day. This was 5 years after John Adams and Thomas Jefferson had passed. But yeah, keeping with that, all people who played a pretty important role in the formation of the United States, dying on the anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Pretty cool.
Interesting.
Or cool, I guess, is relative, but
yeah, it's cool to die.
It's cool that it happened.
Okay.
We honor that.
Interesting.
I'll go with that.
I mean, James Monroe. All right. I mean, somebody's got to be 5th. Monroe Doctrine. I've heard of it.
He's actually one of 2 U.S. presidents who have a national capital named for them. Of course, you have Washington, D.C., and we have Monrovia. It's the capital of Liberia country.
Named after James Monroe.
James Monroe.
Go Liberia. Well,
I know.
Can I get a little more detail on how Liberia has been decided?
James Monroe, he was a big supporter of the colonization of Liberia. I guess they honored him with the naming of their capital.
What about Jeffersonville?
I know you got Jefferson City,
Lincoln.
They got states, but they didn't really do much.
So we're just talking national capitals.
That was national capitals.
Okay.
But yeah, there's a lot of presidents that have some state capitals.
Okay.
Last, number 5, the atomic number 5 belongs to boron, symbol of B. Borax, in its mineral form, first saw use as a glaze beginning in China. It was actually brought from China to Italy by Marco Polo in the 13th century. And now it's used in a lot of different chemical compounds and a key element in fiberglass. It's also, there's some boron in Pyrex bowls. And that's kind of what keeps it from exploding and being able to keep the heat, and pretty important there.
Boring.
That was pretty weak. I think then in hockey, we got 5 for fighting, right? 5 minutes for fighting.
And you got the 5-hole. You score a goal in the old 5-hole.
That's the top left.
No.
I know. Right between the legs, between the wickets.
Yes, as they say in the Canadian country.
Let's start with hockey. We can talk about some players who wore the number 5. starting with Nicklas Lidström.
He put a few through the 5-hole.
Quite a few. He was a 7-time winner of the Norris Trophy as the top defenseman. He's also the all-time leader in games played with a single NHL team by a European-born player. So he spent 20 years playing in the NHL, 4-time Stanley Cup champion, named one of the 100 greatest NHL players in 2017, and inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2015. He is the NHL player who has played the most games while always playing for that same team with 1,500 games. So it's like the Kobe of hockey. It's convenient when you buy a house there.
You definitely become much more of a legend if you can play your whole career in that one city. If you can bring them a title, even better if you can bring multiple titles. But if you play for a team for a long time, you're not buying a drink in that town anymore.
When he first got drafted by the Red Wings, the equipment manager of the Red Wings said, "Hey, Nicklas, what number would you like if you make the team?" He thought, and he's like, "Well, in native Sweden, I wore the number 9. And he was told, "Hey, kid, that's just not going to happen." Because number 9, of course, had long been retired in honor of maybe the greatest Red Wings and hockey player of all time, Gordie Howe. And so he said, I just kept my mouth shut, and they gave me number 5. 20 years after he played, that number was hanging in the Joe Louis Arena rafters alongside Howe and some other retired numbers with the Red Wings. He's probably one of the greatest defensemen in Red Wings history. Another guy, Ulf Samuelsson. He played for the Whalers, Penguins, and Rangers, won 2 Stanley Cups for the Penguins, and 15 of those 16 years he was wearing the number 5. He was often viewed by NHL stars as, quote, the most hated man in hockey. He was described to the New York Times as the lowest form of human being and someone whose play is all about, quote, trying to hurt you and knock you out of the game. One of his, I guess, infamous for his knee-to-knee hit on Boston Bruins' Cam Neely during the 91 playoffs. That was a contributing factor of Neely's early retirement 5 years later. It may have seemed a little suspect because of his history, but it really was after watching the video, it's a pretty, I don't want to say routine, but it didn't look like he did it with
malicious intent.
With any malicious intent. He was the first European-born player to have 2,000 career penalty minutes.
Attaboy.
Oof. Maybe that's what people said when he got hit. Last NHL guy I have, Guy Lapointe.
What a guy.
He was nicknamed Pointu, a play on his name in French, where Pointu carries the same meanings as sharp or pointy in English. He was famous for his powerful slap shots and brutal body checks. He played on the Canadiens and won the Stanley Cup 6 times, all in the 70s. He also had a pretty good sense of humor and a prankster. He had a prank where he coated his hands in Vaseline and then had a handshake with the then Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau as he was visiting the Canadiens locker room. That's something you would do to like a president. You put some Vaseline on your hands and like, "Hey, Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister."
It's not something I would do, but these guys,
hockey guys are
built a little different.
They're a little out there. Moving on to basketball. The first one that comes to mind for me, Jason Kidd, played for the Mavericks, Nets, and Knicks for 11 seasons. He did wear 2 during his lone championship with the Mavericks in 2011. 8 of his years with the number 5 were all-star seasons, and there were 5 years where he finished in the top 10 in MVP voting. He also has a career high of 25 assists during his first stint with the Mavs. It's a lot of assists. A couple of members of the Fab Five.
Can you name the Fab Five?
You can't name all 5.
Oh, sure I can. Jalen Rose, Juwan Howard, Chris Webber, Ray King.
I'm waiting.
Oh. The other one was a good player. Ray King should be the one that you wouldn't know.
Jimmy King?
Jimmy King? Okay.
You confused the last 2. You put them together. Ray
Finkel.
Ray Jackson.
Okay. First team to start 5 freshmen. Jalen wore number 5. And Juwan wore 5 in the pros.
In that, yep. Yeah, so the Fab Five obviously played the University of Michigan basketball team in 91 and 92. They made it to the championship both years, came away with 0 championships.
Whoa. Time out. Too soon?
Oh, I got you. Okay, that was a little slow for me.
Were you even alive back then? Did you even watch the game?
I was 2 years old, 3 years old.
Were you really? Oh, no.
And I knew you can't call a timeout when you don't have timeouts. Man,
there was a travel on that play, too.
Yeah, which shouldn't have even gotten to the timeout. But even when you look at that, he called the timeout And there were players on the bench who were like also not aware of how many timeouts they had. There were a couple of guys that were like cheering because they made it down across the half court line, got the timeout. And there was like, I think 2 or 3 guys on the bench that gave a little cheer and then were like, oh crap. Yeah.
I even feel like the coaches were telling him to call timeout, but he definitely took the heat. And listen, you got to know where
you got to know. I did not make it to college basketball. I did make it to high school basketball, but every single timeout, I feel like our coach was always like, hey, we got 2 more. We got 3 more. So we were always ready for that.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like this is a great segue to another number 5, J.R. Smith. I mean, you want to talk about some boneheaded plays.
It's being aware of situations.
Ew. Now, they probably weren't going to win that finals anyway. I mean,
that was the one where he got the rebound, thought they were winning?
It was tied.
Okay.
And he thought they were winning. LeBron's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, he did not look happy there.
Oh, how could you be?
And it didn't lose in the game. LeBron was pretty mad. Didn't lose in the game. They still went to overtime.
They lost them.
Obviously, they did lose, but that exact him not shooting the ball didn't lose him the game.
He rebounded the basketball right underneath the goal with no one guarding it.
I'm not saying it was a bonehead move. They still had a chance to win the game beyond that, had they been a better team.
Yeah, but I mean, at that point, your team is in disarray.
But the principle of what I'm saying,
you're not going into overtime like, okay, we made it to overtime.
Yeah,
that's great. You're going to the bench after that.
Man, we should have won that game.
And you're having a hard time getting reset at that point. A couple of boneheaded number 5s, in my opinion.
So Jalen Rose had a 13-year career. 12 of those years were with 5 teams in which he wore the number 5. One of his most successful seasons was alongside Reggie Miller on the Pacers that made 3 consecutive Eastern Conference Finals and did reach the 2000 NBA Finals. His father was Jimmy Walker, who was the number 1 overall pick out of Providence in 1967. Jalen had never met him in person. So he got the basketball genes, but never actually met his father.
Hence the different last name.
I guess that would probably be where that came from. Then Juwan Howard, he played 16 years, number 5 for 8 different teams. He is the only member of the Fab Five to win an NBA championship, which he did in his last 2 years, in 2012 and 2013, though he didn't play a game in the playoffs in the 2013 run.
I mean, I know you're a Boston guy. I think you're missing one.
Anything is possible.
I mean,
Kevin Garnett,
manufactured I'm on TV moments.
Then we'll cut to Jason Tatum of the current.
I mean, I had a hard time believing that was spontaneous.
For Kevin Garnett, I think it might have been. He spent 6 years with the Celtics wearing number 5. I think today he's not going to be in our greatest number 5s, but when we get to number 21, which he wore for his 14 years in Minnesota in a couple different stints, I believe he'll be making a good case.
Yeah, I think 21 he's got a better chance than number 5. I mean, once we get to baseball, I think this thing's going to get blown wide open. But
he won the championship in 2008 with Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, and did win Defensive Player of the Year. So yeah, he had a little resume with a number 5.
Oh, his best years were in Boston, but he had the help. It's hard to tell. He'd been playing with Ray Allen and Paul Pierce for his entire career, how many they would have gotten, and they had Rondo at the point, who was in his prime. They were not to be messed with. I love how fiery Garnett is. I recently saw a story with Dirk Nowitzki where Dirk's just killing him. Dirk's just taking it to him, and Garnett goes up to Paul Pierce, and he's like, hey, he called me the N-word. And Paul Pierce is like, no, he didn't. He's like, yeah, he did. And Dirk probably sitting over there like, what the heck did I do? And he's just trying to get himself fired up, and whatever he can do to kind of drum up that fire. He's starting to make stuff up about his opponent and what they said to him, what they did to him. And, I thought that was a pretty funny story. Yeah. I mean,
he's a trash talker.
He could talk some trash. I think that's where he loves to talk trash. Even today, you see him in interviews and he's still kind of got that same personality. Kind of you love him if he's on your team. You probably hate him if he's not. Was one of the first, I know Moses Malone got drafted out of high school, but then once Garnett got drafted out of high school, that kind of opened the door for guys like Kobe and LeBron and so on. So, he was really the one that kind of took that leap successfully to have a good long NBA career.
Big Shot Bob.
Big Shot Bob. I love me some Robert Horry.
He wore 5 for just 2 teams, the Lakers and Spurs, over his 11 years. The other 6 years he wore the number 25, and he has the most championships by someone who did not play for the Celtics. He has 7 total, and he went 7-0 in championship games, including his time wearing the number 25.
Well, Rockets, Lakers, and Spurs?
Yeah, yep. 3 with the Lakers, 2 with the Spurs, 2 with the Rockets.
I love those Lakers teams of the early 2000s. I was a big fan, and one of my favorite Robert Horry shots was against the Kings. I don't know what game it was in the series, but I was down in my basement, watching the game by myself as a teenager, and they missed some shots, and the ball kind of goes, and it looks like it's going in the backcourt, and Robert Horry's not even on the screen. Can't even see him on TV. All of a sudden, he's got the ball, boom, drills a long 3 to win the game, and I remember running up to talking to my dad, being like, "Oh, Dad, you missed a huge shot, a huge game," and Big Shot Bob. That's the night he was born in my world, but went on to hit so many big shots.
Yeah, he was never the star of his team because he's playing with Kobe, with Duncan, with Olajuwon, but he was always a solid support man on the team. Did hit some pretty solid big shots in the playoffs. He has the NBA record for most 3-point shots made in an NBA playoff game without a miss, and the record for most steals in an NBA Finals game. Him and Steve Kerr, Steve Kerr wore the number 5 for about 3 years with the Suns and Cavaliers, another pretty solid reserve player and clutch shooter. They alternated NBA championships for about a decade and combined to win 12 championships over a 14-year period. Either Kerr or Horry was on the roster of an NBA Finals team beginning in the 93 season all the way to the 2003 season. So one of them were on the roster of a Finals team. That's pretty crazy.
That's very crazy. That's a cool stat. So who does that leave you with? I think I'm on in the Jason Kidd camp here as our top basketball guy.
But we can revisit that when we get to the...
I don't think it's going to matter after we start talking about baseball.
You mentioned baseball and where our best number 5 is coming from.
Yeah, the only other sport I need to talk about before baseball, NASCAR's had some pretty good number 5s. Hendricks Motorsports owns that car, and Kyle Larson won the title wearing number 5 in 2019. Terry Labonte, Ricky Rudd, Mark Martin ran a few races with them. Kyle Busch ran a few races with them. So a lot of wins there at the number 5 car, but worth mentioning. But again, nobody that's going to top some of these baseball guys where we're about to talk about.
We'll sneak in some football guys real quick before baseball, starting with Donovan McNabb, who wore number 5 for his whole career with the Eagles, Redskins, and Vikings for 13 years total. He also wore 5 for the Syracuse Orangemen, where he holds the school record for longest pass, a 96-yard pass to future Hall of Famer Marvin Harrison. He also played for Jim Boeheim on the basketball team and was on the team when they lost in the national championship game. Didn't play much, but he was on the team. He was drafted 2nd overall to the Eagles behind Cleveland Browns legend Tim Couch. McNabb actually got booed as he was drafted because Heisman winner Ricky Williams was the fan favorite pick, and I think the Eagles won out best with that. Donovan McNabb became a much better player than Ricky Williams or Tim Couch.
Ricky Williams and Donovan McNabb both have seen a little bit of off-the-field troubles, but Donovan's was mostly after his career.
In his career, he is tied for the most postseason wins by a quarterback whose teams did not win the Super Bowl with 9. He is tied with Jim Kelly, who I think who made it to quite a few Super Bowls. He's leading the Eagles in basically any career quarterback stat in Eagles history, and his number 5 was retired by the Eagles.
Caught a lot of hate, in the beginning and end of his career there in Philly. I think after losing that Super Bowl to the Patriots, and then T.O., I think, had some contract disputes. I think he was in his driveway talking a little smack. And then there's that whole, did he puke? Did he not puke? In the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl. Either way, they were down double digits and still kind of mounted a little bit of a comeback. But, 1-4 in the NFC Conference Championship game. But in 98, they were 3-13, and he came in the next 11 seasons and took them to 5 NFC championship games, had a really excellent career. So, yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. Better pick than Ricky Williams at the end of their careers. Did you know he ran a 4.64 40?
Wow.
Yeah, so, quick. He was a running quarterback.
Yeah, he was one of the original, like him and Mike Vick. They were the scrambling quarterbacks who you had to be aware of as a defense.
Yeah, the dual threat. I think he was about 6'2", 240. So I mean, he was a truck, hard to bring down. But went on to be a commentator and did decent with the Redskins. But yeah, I mean, as far as football goes, he was probably the best in my book to wear number 5. And quarterbacks always have a little bit of an advantage.
Joe Flacco, he was a number 5. He was a University of Delaware Blue Hen. And in April 2012, he was, as the New York Times later stated, quote, almost universally mocked when he stated that he was the best quarterback in the league, saying that he's superior to Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, or even Aaron Rodgers. He did say,
Said that?
He said that. He said, I don't think I'd be very successful at my job if I didn't feel that way, which I guess is a good mindset.
I mean,
like,
sure.
All right, you have to have that self-confidence, but he did end up winning a Super Bowl, was named MVP.
Brady always had a defense, so I could see him being better than Brady, but Manning...
We're not talking about 12 here. But even just a year later, after he said that he was one of the best or the best quarterback in the NFL, after winning the Super Bowl, he became the highest paid quarterback in NFL history when he signed a 6-year contract worth $120 million.
How'd that work out for him?
Hey, got $120 million.
How about the team?
He's the first quarterback to start and win a playoff game in each of his first 5 seasons. He has the most touchdowns without an interception in a postseason, which I believe has 11 touchdowns without an interception.
He's never thrown an interception in the postseason?
In a single postseason, so in that postseason.
Oh, okay.
Couple kickers worth mentioning here. Morton Anderson, who had a long career, I think about 25 years, is one of 2 people whose positions were only kickers who has made it to the Hall of Fame. He wore number 5 for the Falcons during 2 different stints. Ultimately, I don't believe he has it anymore, but he had the record for most points in a career, I think has since been broken by Adam Vinatieri. But he has played in the most NFL games of anybody in history. Matt Prater, another kicker, who wore number 5 in 17 of his 18 years with the Broncos, Lions, and Cardinals. He was with the Broncos during that Tebow run when Tebow was an actual NFL quarterback and was super consistent during that season. The team would do nothing during the first 3 quarters. Tebow would have a little drive, and then Prater would kick a field goal to win the game. He did have the longest field goal record of 64 yards until Justin Tucker kicked a 66-yarder. And he has the NFL record for most 50-plus yard field goals made in NFL history with 80. And he has actually kicked the most extra points in a single season with 75. Paul Hornig, nicknamed the Golden Boy, he was a halfback and kicker who played for the Packers back in the 50s and 60s, except for the 63 season, for which he was suspended after a scandal involving gambling. But he was reinstated and elected to the Hall of Fame. I know I'm opening a can of worms right now.
I'm just looking at you like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah, Pete Rozelle kind of reinstated him after a year.
L?
Oh my gosh, full circle.
This is a conspiracy theory if I've ever heard one.
He is a 4-time NFL champion and was a member of the team that won the first Super Bowl. He's elected into the Hall of Fame. He won the Heisman when he played for the University of Notre Dame, and actually was the only Heisman Trophy winner to be playing for a team with a losing record. They were 2-8. Was apparently the best college football player in the league.
Are you kidding me?
It's no joke. He was elected to the Green Bay Packers Hall of Fame, 75. They didn't retire his number, but they have not reissued the number. Moving on to baseball, where I believe our best jersey number will come from one of these lists.
If I can cut you off, I do have one more football player that I need to talk about. I don't know if he was on your list. Soccer-style kicker, graduated from Collier High, June 1976. Stetson University honors graduate class of 1980. Holds 2 NCAA Division I records, one for the most points in a season, one for distance. Former nicknamed the Mule, the first and only pro athlete to come out of Collier High and one hell of a model American, Ray Finkel. Missed the kick to win the 1984 Super Bowl, held by Dan Marino.
Well, it's That was all on Dan Marino, right? His
Laces out, Dan.
Laces were out.
But I think we'd be remiss not to mention the great Ray Finkel. Finkel is Einhorn. Einhorn is Finkel.
I have seen his jersey worn at some Dolphins games.
Well, he wore number 5. All right, we're going to run out of time if we don't get to these baseball players.
There are a lot of baseball players to get to. It's interesting. So a lot of these guys have spent basically their whole careers with the same team, the same number. So it's gonna be a fun talk.
Hey, where do we start?
We'll start current, and we'll kind of maybe move back. Freddie Freeman, he's still playing, obviously, but he has been playing for 15 years. First 12 were with the Braves. Last 3 have been with the Dodgers. He is a World Series champion and MVP winner, 8-time All-Star, 3-time Silver Slugger, and Gold Glove winner. It's crazy that a 15-year career World Series champion, he's not going to be one of our people. So we're going to keep moving on.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we're going to come across these guys. It's a long list of players who have had great careers, and we're not going to say much about them.
David Wright, 14 years with the Mets, 7-time All-Star, 2-time Silver Slugger, 2-time Gold Glove.
No ma.
Now ma Garcia para. 15 years with 5 teams, won the Rookie of the Year, 6-time All-Star, 2-time batting champ. He was the runner-up for the MVP in 1998. And now I think we're moving to at least people who have a little bit more, people who are at least Hall of Famers, but we will still have to narrow this down. Jeff Bagwell, also a Rookie of the Year and MVP winner. He was elected to the Hall of Fame in 2017 on his 7th ballot. He has 2,300 hits, 449 home runs, and a career .297 batting average. He played for 15 years. He's the only player in Major League Baseball history to have 6 consecutive seasons with 30 home runs, 100 RBI, 100 runs scored, and 100 walks. And then just a side note with him, we had mentioned a couple episodes ago with Alan Trammell, Jeff Bagwell and Craig Biggio. They are the duo who have spent the most games playing together. I think it was just over 2,000 games. Jeff Bagwell, of course, played first base, and Biggio was second base. And they played a lot of games together.
Killer Bees?
They were part of the Killer Bees. Brooks Robinson wore number 5 for 21 of his 23 years with the Orioles. Nicknamed Mr. Oriole, human vacuum cleaner. Him, along with Carl Yastrzemski, they are the only 2 people to spend 23 years with the same team. He was elected to the Hall of Fame in his first ballot with 92% of the vote. He has won the MVP, World Series MVP, 18-time All-Star, 16-time Gold Glove, which were consecutive. His 2,870 career games at third base not only exceeded the closest player by nearly 700 games when he retired, but also remained the most games played by any player at a single position. It's a lot of games. That's a lot of Gold Gloves. And that's a lot of All-Stars.
That's a lot of stats. You know, I feel like I wish I had more to say about Brooks Robinson. He was a little bit before my time, as well as a couple others.
Yeah, but going again, I know the name, but never really looked at the stats too much before just now.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a 4-hour show where we're trying to get people to work, but what an amazing career. 16 Gold Gloves in a row. That's a record, right?
Has to be.
Has to be.
People don't play for 16 years, let alone win.
Time all-star. Now, I get it. Towards the end of your career, probably the last 3 or 4 are probably kind of honorary all-stars.
Yeah, and especially when they get voted in to fan vote.
But still, I mean, what an amazing career.
Another amazing career. You got Johnny Bench, who spent 17 years with the Reds.
I feel like we're really getting into the meat here, meat and potatoes.
Yeah, we got about 3 or 4 guys left. I think these are ones that are going to make a run. So 17 years with the Reds, was elected to the Hall of Fame in his first ballot with 96% of the vote. He's a 2-time most valuable player, 2-time World Series champion, and won the MVP for one of those World Series. Rookie of the Year winner, 14-time All-Star, 10-time Gold Glove winner, 2,000 career hits, and 389 home runs.
Still holds the Major League record for most grand slams by a catcher with 10. Also once said that he broke 17 bones and 7 cups. Hopefully that was post-children.
I was going to say, does he have any kids?
He said when he was 20 years old, he caught 154 out of 158 games and caught 54 straight games in a row without a day off.
Going back a little bit further than that, Joe DiMaggio, he spent 13 years with the Yankees, 12 wearing the number 5. 3 years in the middle of that were off because of the war. He was elected to the Hall of Fame in his 4th ballot with 88% of the vote. He is a 13-time All-Star, so he was an All-Star every single year he played. 3-time Most Valuable Player, 2-time batting title. He's a 9-time World Series champion. He also has maybe considered one of the most unbreakable records in Major League Baseball, a 56-game hit streak. This is a streak and story that transcended sports in 1941, took the public attention away from the war a little bit that was happening at the time, and really just drew people in, got a lot of people following baseball. During the streak, he had 91 base hits in 223 at-bats for a 408 average. 55 runs were batted in during this period, and his hit count included 15 home runs, and he also had 56 runs scored during the 56-game hit streak. In the final 11 games of the streak, he had a 545 average with 24 hits and 44 at-bats. He had at least one base hit in the following 15 games as well. So in a 73-game span, there was just one game that he did not have a hit.
Unbelievable. I feel like even a 15-game hitting streak today, they start bringing up Joe DiMaggio's name like you're somewhere close, and he kind of did that as his encore. A little DiMaggio fun fact for you. Dom DiMaggio had a 34-game hitting streak for the Red Sox in 1949. For Vince DiMaggio, the third DiMaggio brother, he had a 12-game hitting streak for the Pirates in 1941. So something's in the water at the DiMaggio house. Another little fun fact, he had 361 home runs, 369 strikeouts. He had less strikeouts in the entire 1941 season, and I don't know when you're listening to this, but that's fewer than Giancarlo Stanton had last week.
DiMaggio did end up winning the Most Valuable Player in that 1941 year. The Yankees had won the AL pennant by 17 games and then defeated the Brooklyn Dodgers in the World Series. He beat out Ted Williams, who batted 400 for the season. So that means you had a pretty good year.
Yeah, what a season in baseball. You hit 400, you don't even win MVP. But, I mean,
just well-deserving for...
I know they gave Manning and McNabb the co-MVP. I mean, if there's ever a time for baseball to have a co-MVP...
Those are like two of the greatest single-season stat lines.
I mean, without a doubt.
Crazy.
Without a doubt. What a time to be a baseball fan.
And you mentioned Dom DiMaggio, who I think really no other player has really gotten even close to getting 56, let alone 46 or 36. Since 2001, ESPN they have that Beat the Streak, which I don't know if you tried, but requires normal people like me and you pick an MLB player that you think is going to get a hit in a game on that day. The goal is to correctly pick 57 games in a row to beat DiMaggio's record streak. You do that, super easy. You get 5.6 million. I think they said there's been over 100 million attempts, but no one has reached more than, I think 52 is the record. And it's crazy that this is people in today's world that can just do so much research, and you have to pick one guy of the hundreds that are in Major League Baseball. This is just one guy who did it 56 games in a row.
In real life.
He didn't have to just click on a computer. Another guy, we got to bring it back. He was mentioned on Seinfeld. There's the one episode where Kramer says he saw him in Dinky's Donuts. He had his coffee, he had his donut, and he would dip his donut. And of course, Jerry didn't believe that DiMaggio was a dunker, went back and forth, and then Kramer, trying to get his attention, he started kind of kicking the table, making some loud yep, 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 trying to get his attention. And Kramer said he had no reaction because he was so focused. He can just block out anything that's going on around him. That's how he played baseball. He dunks like he hits. Get rid of all the noises, anything that's not gonna...
Seinfeld and sports. How do you not like Seinfeld as a sports fan?
Of course, he also, and this kind of goes outside the Digits Dynasty, not going to affect his ranking here, but he famously was in love with Marilyn Monroe for his whole life. That's true. That could only help, really. But after Marilyn Monroe's passing, Joe DiMaggio sent half dozen flowers 3 times a week to her grave for 20 years. He was just in love with her. They were only married for 9 months. Then they got divorced. And
Why did they get divorced?
I think DiMaggio was he was a jealous person, and Monroe's, she was the sex goddess of the 40s and 50s, and I think he a control freak. I think that didn't really work out between the two of them.
An athlete was a control freak?
Crazy.
And a Hollywood star liked to party?
Crazy.
Huh. Well, I mean, I'm shocked it didn't work out. Yeah. Good for him, showing the love after she passed.
George Brett, another number 5, spent 21 years with the Royals. 19 of those were wearing the number 5. He was elected to the Hall of Fame in 99 with 98.2% of the vote on his first ballot. 13-time All-Star, did it every year from 76 to 88. World Series champion in 1985. AL MVP in 1980. And he is the only player in Major League history to win a batting title in 3 different decades. 70s, 80s, and 90s.
You know, he was well on his way to hit 400 in 1980.
He's, I think, one of the closest to get to it, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure he looks back at that season because I think he was slumping the whole first, month of the season. Didn't do anything. Just went on a tear after that, but couldn't quite make it to 400. And then obviously the most famous video, July 24th, 1983, with 2 outs in the 9th and UL Washington on first base. Brett steps up to the plate and hits a huge homer off of Goose Gossage, giving the Royals a 5-4 lead. But while he was celebrating, Billy Martin, Yankees manager, was protesting the bat. And I think we all know where this went with the pine tar. And they called the home run no home run. He's out.
And he got ejected too, right?
He got ejected.
Because there was too much pine tar, right?
Yeah, they said that the pine tar give the batters a better grip, hardens over time, making the bat more effective. So we had, a harder surface. The bat was carefully measured against the 17-inch width of the home plate and determined that the bat violated the 18-inch pine tar rule. Turned to the Royals dugout and signaled that Brett was out, ending the game. And that at that time, George Brett with the big old chew in his mouth goes running out.
Yeah, that's a pretty iconic.
I love it.
Like the arms flailing. He's also credited with popularizing the phrase the Mendoza line, which is used to represent a sub-200 batting average and regarded as unacceptable at the major league level. Comes from shortstop Mario Mendoza, number 11, who was a career .215 hitter who finished below 200 5 times in his 9 seasons in the big leagues, including a 198 the year the term is claimed to have been coined. George Brett had referred to the Mendoza line in an interview, which was picked up by Chris Berman and then expanded it into the world of SportsCenter. I was not aware of the kind of origin of that. I knew it was average player Mario Mendoza. I knew that, but I didn't know that George Brett kind of brought that into the lexicon.
I mean, what did Mendoza, Mendoza's probably like,
poor guy, like, hey, man,
what did I do?
I hit 200 in the majors.
Okay, I'm not George Brett, but why do I have to be the guy that everybody measures their, futility against? If you haven't looked up the George Brett crab leg story, I highly recommend going on YouTube and just search George Brett, crab legs, George Brett.
Yeah, I think
going to the bathroom.
I was going to say, well, trying to keep it as clean as possible. I think he's having a fun time in Vegas. Had some crab legs.
They were like given to him. They came out and said, "Hey, George Brett, have some crab legs."
I think he ate them, and then they ended up leaving his body fairly quickly from a different opening.
He's standing in the lobby of the Bellagio Hotel.
Destroyed his pants in the lobby of the Bellagio. This is coming from him. Like, it's not even like it's like a third-hand account. He had to call a friend to bring him some pants.
Changes in the bathroom, leaves his clothes, shoes, walks out barefoot, and
enjoys the rest of his Vegas trip.
That's it. I mean, and he finishes off and says, "You know what? The next day he went to the bathroom. It was one of the best experiences he'd had." So, a great storyteller, and
George
I
Brett.
highly recommend looking that video up.
I think one more baseball guy I have on my list, now retired Albert Pujols. He spent 22 years wearing the number 5 for the Angels and Cardinals. There was part of one year that he wore number 55 with the Dodgers. I'm trying to think of another 55 who played baseball. He could be talking about Pujols again when we get to the number 55. Side note, but so as the number 5, he only had 691 career home runs. 12
only.
Yeah, it's true. So he had 12 with the number 55 with the Dodgers. So he didn't quite reach that 700 home run mark with the number 5 on his back. I don't think that's really going to hurt him too much in our debate here. He is an 11-time All-Star, 2-time World Series champion, 3-time NL MVP. He hit home runs off a record 458 different pitchers over the course of his career, which is just crazy. The fact that people don't have obviously 458 home runs, and here he's hitting home runs off of that many different pitchers is crazy. Tony La Russa, his manager with the Cardinals, called him the best player I ever managed. He will probably, I think, go down as one of the greatest right-handed hitters of all time. Became the first player to produce 4 hits and 2 homers in a single game at the age of 42 or older in August of 2022. He is expected to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. He will become eligible for the Hall of Fame in 2028.
Now, I don't know if you mentioned it, but DiMaggio didn't get into his 4th ballot.
Yeah, I did mention that. And
so that makes Albert, 4 or 5 ballots in to get in.
Crazy.
It's not crazy. It's dumb.
But it's,
Jose Alberto Pujols Alcantara.
Bless you.
His name.
Oh.
Yeah, you mentioned, 458 pitchers. He hit 5 off of Randy Johnson. He also hit homers off of Greg Maddux, John Smoltz, Trevor Hoffman, and Mike Mussina. Against those 5, Pujols hit a collective 358, slugged 1.011 with a homer every 8.6 at-bats. Homered in 40 different ballparks. There's only 30 teams.
He's in 40 different
40.
ballparks?
He's homered in 40 ballparks.
Wow.
And if you add the homers from the following 2 guys, still does not equal Pujols. Mike Trout and Joey Votto? No. Giancarlo Stanton and Paul Goldschmidt? Not even close. Larry Walker, Matt Holliday.
Get out of here.
Johnny Bench, Ivan Rodriguez.
Nope.
Albert Bell and Prince Fielder.
Are you crazy?
None of those combos are going to be more than Pujols hit in his career. So, I mean, just crazy. Pujols went from being drafted in the 13th round out of junior college in 99 and started for the Cardinals 2 years later on opening day in 2001.
Yeah, I remember he was young when he
hit the ground running.
And didn't stop.
No, and he started with Molina there. I think Molina was drafted right around him, so that Molina 4-5 home plate, first base combo. Got him a couple titles there in St. Louis, and we're definitely anchored that team for a decade. Yeah, kind of tailed off once he went to the Angels. It's too bad he left St. Louis. I think he could have been one of those players that, had he stayed in St. Louis, been a legendary player. But I think once he went to L.A. and his stats started to decline a little bit, it kind of hurt his legacy a little bit, I think. So, but nonetheless, how many guys have over 700? 2?
3?
3?
4.
4?
Got
who?
Barry Bonds, Henry Aaron, George Herman, Ruth, Albert. You said the last name, the middle name.
So,
yeah, I think one of only 4 guys to
4 guys to have 700 home runs. That's pretty.
He snuck it in there too. I feel like he had a pretty good tear right at the end, the last couple games.
The coaches did him some favors. They kept putting him in there.
But you still got to hit the ball.
You still got to, but at the same time, probably doing more damage than help. Could barely get to first base there at the end of his career, but nonetheless, got to 700. Joined that small list of players. We're talking about Joe DiMaggio, 361 home runs? He almost doubled that.
I think he has over 3,000 hits as well.
Yeah.
Not many guys have done that either.
No. I love the homered in 40 ballparks.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's interesting. Obviously, there's a couple teams have had new stadiums over the last 22 years.
So I think that kind of rounds out my list. I don't know. Do you have anybody else?
I got no one else.
Okay.
And I think just for continuity, we've done it for all the other ones. We'll pick the greatest number 5 jersey wearer for each sport. As we've mentioned throughout the podcast today, I think it's going to come down to one of our baseball guys.
Yeah, I'm good with Jason Kidd, Donovan McNabb,
Nicklas Lidström.
And then I think it comes down to these baseball guys. And for me, it's between DiMaggio and Pujols.
Yeah, no disrespect to anyone else. Some of these stats I feel like would be, I think my advice to kids coming up these days is to not pick one of these numbers that has a lot of history with it. Like, I think if you want to be known as the greatest particular jersey number of all time, I feel like you gotta be wearing like 77 in baseball, 89 in baseball, and I think that's what you got. You got to do that, and you gotta have a good career, and then we'll talk about you in like 20 years.
Yeah. Don't take a single digit number. Don't take 25. Don't take these numbers that have been around. Take 89.
That's it. You're by default. I think we'll probably mention you in our next podcast.
72.
72, actually. I think that Carlton Fisk scored 72. Don't do that one. 71. You want to start the debate here?
Yeah. I mean, I'm still on the fence, honestly. I'm looking at 9 world championships, a 56-game hitting streak, only 369 strikeouts, dating Marilyn Monroe.
Married to.
Sergeant in the Army.
Obviously for us, or for me, as a young guy who did not watch Joe DiMaggio, it's tough to really compare. Like, we're just looking at the digits. Obviously, I saw Albert Pujols play for his whole career, heard stories, read stats about Joe DiMaggio. Both have 3 MVPs. Joe DiMaggio has 9 World Series. Pujols has 2. Both, I think we can assume, will be in the Hall of Fame. Pujols does have about 10 years playing on him, though.
Yeah, I mean, 700 home runs. That's a lot. I think I'm leaning towards DiMaggio.
DiMaggio has my vote right now.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning towards DiMaggio.
It's crazy. You're a Cardinals guy.
I mean, I am, but I'm also a realist, and 9 titles, 56-game hitting streak.
I think the 9 titles really does it for me. Yogi Berra has the record with 10 in baseball, right?
Yeah, but he wasn't that good.
He wasn't that good. But having the 56-game hit streak, I think, is just such an iconic record. It just shows the consistency, the dominance that he had, and just consistency for his whole career. Winning 9 World Series in 13 years, that's as consistent. And he was a pretty big part of that. He's not just he's not on the side of those teams.
I mean, DiMaggio did play alongside of Lou Gehrig, so it's hard to say if Pujols and Lou Gehrig were playing on the same team, would Pujols have been able to amass the same number of titles?
Well, Lou Gehrig is also like 50 years older than Albert Pujols, so I feel like he wouldn't really be.
But, barely removed from Babe Ruth. 4 straight titles, 36, 37, 38, 39. I mean, you're just killing it. Then he 3-peat, 49, 50, 51. I'm good with Joe DiMaggio. I don't know how you can argue against him. I can argue against Pujols. He played 20 years, but the last 10 years, I don't think he did. I don't think he was anywhere close in the MVP race.
Yeah, he was known as the Yankee Clipper.
And he's got one thing that Pujols doesn't have.
The marriage to
Seinfeld.
Oh, he was a dunker.
Yeah, debatable.
And I don't think we need to talk ourselves out of this, but I think Joe DiMaggio is the greatest number 5. I think Joe DiMaggio is the best to wear the number 5. Yeah, across all sports, he's the best. The Yankee Clipper.
Yeah, I don't know when it's all said and done how many single-digit Yankee jerseys are going to be hanging up on this wall, but
as a Red Sox fan, hopefully not too many.
Yeah,
we were able to keep Babe Ruth out, but I don't know that we can do that for all single-digit numbers.
Yeah, we caught a lot of grief for not putting the Babe up there, but that's okay. Sports is all about opinions and debate, so I love it. I love the feedback that we got and we get. I think Joe DiMaggio, clear-cut winner here today. he's going up on the wall, the number 5 in pinstripes.
Love it. Let's take a look ahead to next week to see what we're going to be looking at. About to spin the wheel. $96.
Okay. I'm gonna have to dig deep in the well here.
Yeah, nothing's really coming to mind super fast. I've hit obviously 96. I feel like we're gonna get maybe some defensive guys in the NFL, probably some hockey guys. I'm not thinking we'll see any baseball or basketball guys.
Yeah, 96. I mean, nothing really coming to mind.
I will tell you the one that is coming to mind is Charlie Conway from the Mighty Ducks.
That might be our whole episode. We're going to have to do some research here, Blair. I don't know about 96. Listen, we're doing all the numbers, 0 to 99. So we got to do 96 at some point. Might be a short episode.
Yeah, this
but
might not be. Yeah, I feel like we've been hitting about an hour for the last couple episodes, a little over. I don't think we'll be hitting an hour in the 96 next week.
Listen, I'm excited to talk about the Mighty Ducks.
Quack.
Let's
quack.
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 Quack. Quack. Quack. Quack. Go Ducks. Yeah, well, we'll have to look up some people who wore the 96, and we'll have some answers for you next week. There we have the greatest number 5 of all time in our books, Joe DiMaggio. Write us, let us know if you agree, disagree, if there are any players that we missed. Our email address is digitsdynastypodcast@gmail.com. Our Instagram handle is Digits Dynasty Podcast. Next week, we will look at the number 96. If there are any players that are not to be left off the list, if there are any people that you can think of who are the 96, please let us know. The email address again is digitsdynastypodcast@gmail.com. 56 consecutive games with a hit. I'm trying to think of anything that I could do for 56 days in a row that would be impressive.
I think one of the most iconic records in sports.
It really is.
When I think of sports and records and numbers, I think we might eventually do an episode on just records. This is going to be one that's talked about again.
Yeah, I think you have this one. You have, I guess back in the day, it was the Roger Maris 61, but now it's going to be Barry Bonds 73. Some of those that are just iconic, going to be tough to break in general. And I think this is one that, I think there's a lot of those records from the 1800s where you have the triples, or I feel like ones that there's kind of different rules back then, and yeah, they're unbreakable, but there's really no way you can break them in today's world. But this is a realistic, I feel like you can compare apples to apples from 1941 having a hit streak to 2024 having a hit streak. I think there's really, you can compare those, and it's incredibly difficult to do that again.
Definitely impressive. And did I hear that he barred the Kennedys from the Monroe funeral?
He did not want JFK to go to that funeral, which is crazy. He's the president.
He said he was a jealous guy, so, ask not what you can do for your country. Ask not what you can do.
Whatever is that?
What is it?
Ask not what you can do for your country, but what your country can do for you. We are not accent people.
Ask not what you can do for you.
Let's stick with sports and numbers. I think we can do that. Let's keep the accents to someone else. Thank you for listening, and please join us next week as we count down another number on the list.